Welcome to VCR, a virtual cinema rewind. Blake here with a brief introduction. This is The Matrix Primer Part 2. Jason and I are really excited for the release of The Matrix Resurrections out December 22nd. So we thought we'd give our viewers a primer on everything you need to know going into the fourth movie. So, if this is your first time finding our podcast here, this is part 2, where we go over the Matrix Revolutions, as well as the Animatrix and any other supplementary material we thought might be relevant to the fourth movie. And we get into some of our own personal theories, internet theories, and maybe some other stuff to get you ready for the fourth movie. If you're looking for a primer on the first Matrix movie or The Matrix Reloaded, I highly recommend going to the first part of this primer where we go over both those movies in detail. Without further ado, here's The Matrix Primer Part 2.
Yeah, so third movie starts out where Neo is in a coma still. Same with Bane, his counterpart in the beginning of this movie, where we know Bane now is potentially or is fully infected or taken over by Smith. And so they're both in a coma on surgery tables within one of the ships that exists outside of the Matrix. And the crew members are, and Locke, who is an important member of the military arm of the Zion
Fighters,
Freedom
fighters, whatever you want to call them.
He is a great character. He is basically trying to lead the Zion resistance, the army wing, but he isn't super in belief of Neo.
Right.
So he's more of the pragmatic side, the side that's thinking we have to think like machines. And so we're set off in this this beginning where we find out that Neo is partially inside the Matrix.
Yeah, his subconscious is still connected to the Matrix.
Yeah, which is the end of the second movie.
Yeah.
And where we find Neo is in a train station, which is a very coming and going middle ground kind of place.
It's the access point between the machine world and the Matrix.
Which is still separate from the human universe. So it's, very much the mid ground between the humans, the machines, and the Matrix. And it's a very interesting place because he's basically stuck there in a loop. And if he stays there, he will stay there forever. And there's a train conductor coming who is outside of the reach of, let's say, the agents and the machines. He's kind of created this place. He states that he is the god of this place as he punches Neo as if he's still in the Matrix. But Neo doesn't have his in-Matrix powers. And this train conductor basically shows him that I have the power here.
So we do have to quickly mention, because this is also going to be relevant to the fourth movie, that while Neo's in the train station, he does meet a group of programs also in the train station. It's a family of husband, wife, and daughter. And the daughter's name is Sati, who doesn't serve a purpose the same way that the other two programs do. And because of that, this daughter will actually be deleted because she doesn't serve a purpose to the machine world.
Or the Matrix.
Or the Matrix. And so essentially, the parents have decided to strike up an agreement with the Merovingian to take their daughter into the Matrix to basically move into exile and live kind of on the down low kind of thing.
Yeah, like they're trying to preserve her. And the way the father of this family describes it is that he feels a certain love for her. And Neo, as a mostly human and partially computer, like he's in the between worlds, he says, you are a program, how do you understand love? And this father, he says, there's a certain connection that you as humans have this word for love, but there's other purpose to it, and it's a little bit convoluted, but
yeah, we just see that the programs aren't just like Terminators like the Smiths are. They can have emotions, whether they choose to call those emotions or not.
Yeah, like there's a gray area between each of these worlds, and other programs can exist in them.
Yeah, they have beliefs, essentially.
Yeah. From the train station, Neo is trying to get, obviously, back into the Matrix, or at least out of this limbo that he's in at the train station. The train conductor stops him, punches him in the chest, throws him like through a wall, all crazy, like just like if him and Smith were fighting in the Matrix. This guy has all power there. He's a program who controls this way station, and he is in league with the Merovingian, because if you go into the lore and everything and into the theory, basically the Merovingian is like a underworld protector, kind of like, he's like Hades.
Yep.
And he found a area where he could exist and have full power outside of the Matrix, and from there he can bring back programs or delete programs, send them wherever they have to be.
Right. So at this point in time, we've got Morpheus and Trinity who are searching for Neo, and Morpheus just has this inkling that in his head that Neo might be in the Matrix still. So they're contacted actually by the Oracle, who tells them where Neo actually is and kind of the connection between the Train Man and the Merovingian, and that they need the Merovingian's help to if they're ever going to get Neo out of here, essentially.
Yeah, and Neo is like he tries to board a train. Train guy doesn't let him. And then he tries to run through like the train. It's like an underground passage where the trains go. And then he just loops back to where he is. So he's stuck.
Yep.
Trinity and Morpheus have to save him from there. There's no other way out.
Yeah, and so then we get the confrontation with the Merovingian here, which is kind of a whole side plot thing.
There's also another major rave happening, which is very essential to this universe.
So essential.
Raves are the lifeblood of the society. Yeah.
They ask the Merovingian, they demand from the Merovingian the release of Neo. The Merovingian says, "Nah, suck it.
No, he says, "You know what? I'll give you Neo if you give me the Oracle's eye."
Yes, that's his primary motivation, is to eliminate the Oracle. And then we get an awesome line from Trinity, which is very probably similar to like the audience a little bit at this, where she's just like, "I don't have time for this," and just basically grabs the gun and sticks it in the Merovingian's face and says, "All right, we all go out in a blaze of glory right now, or you give us Neo and we just go on our way."
Yeah, and Persephone is again, she is like, she will literally kill us all because she's so in love with Neo. And so the Merovingian says, "Okay, I guess I'll give you where he is."
Yes.
And
so we're reunited.
Yeah, reunited. It's a little too nice of a it was too easy.
It was, but this is also a whole side plot going on. Well, there's all this other stuff. Like, they didn't even need that necessarily.
Yeah. But they needed the fight scene on the rave to start the movie.
I wonder if they maybe needed that to introduce Sati, but whatever. We have a lot to talk about, so let's keep going.
So we have Neo and Bane waking up in one of the one of the ships,
and then another ship comes by and finds them, and this is another regrouping of the only two ships left basically at this point.
And they have found another downed ship, which is captained by Captain Nairobi.
Yes, that's the other ship. Yeah.
Which we should have mentioned Nairobi earlier.
Yeah, Niobe.
Okay.
So that Niobe, very important character because she will be in the next movie as well. So again, captain of another ship, dated Morpheus, no longer dates Morpheus, now dates Commander Locke. and there's some tension between her and Morpheus.
Yeah.
So they get her ship up and running again. Neo gets a message from the Oracle saying that they need to meet. He goes sees the Oracle, who tells Neo basically that he now, instead of going to the source through the original way, what he actually has to do is go to the Machine City to find the source there, which he will end the war if he does that.
Yeah, one way or the other.
One way or the other, yes.
The Oracle knows that she doesn't now understand which way it will go. It's just that it will end.
Yeah. At this point, Neo says, I'm taking one of our ships. And the one captain has very much a problem with that. And Niobe says, fine, he can take my ship. And then Niobe gives up her ship. We've got a limited amount of time here because of all the kind of modifications to her ship to get it up and running so that Neo can go off and do his thing. Niobe takes them on some crazy path on the way back to Zion in order for them to get there in really quick time.
She takes the mechanical lines, which are impossible to pilot.
Yes, yeah, basically
by a human.
Yeah, exactly. So she takes Morpheus and both crews and everybody except for Trinity and Neo, who take the other ship and go to the Machine City. But there's maybe an extra passenger on Trinity and Neo's ship.
So at this point, Bane/Smith wakes up. He kills the nurse that's supposed to be watching after both of them in their coma.
Yep.
And she had already predicted that there's something going on with his brain activity within the Matrix, how it looks so different than anything she's seen, except for the fact that it is a human that's jacked into the Matrix, while this guy's laying right there on the table in front of her. So she kind of predicted that. Bane wakes up after Neo wakes up. Neo's off doing stuff, and then Bane wakes up, and he's starting to speak with a certain cadence.
Might I add, the perfect impression of Hugo Weaving's Agent Smith.
Absolutely amazing. He's just, what if I set off the EMP?
Yes. The enunciation, everything. Perfect.
Yeah.
Matches
everything,
exactly.
Yeah, this guy absolutely killed it there.
Yes. Props to that actor.
Yeah, and obviously the characters in the scenes, they don't really know what Agent Smith sounds like, so she didn't know why he was acting so strange, just that he woke up out of this coma. Then he obviously murders her straight up. Yeah. And then from there, he escapes. And Neo has gotten this new ship from Niobe, who is now piloting another ship.
One of the greatest flights of all time, basically, we'll just say.
Yeah. She's done this before, and everyone's like, no, it's impossible by a human, and she does it again.
Yep.
And then, so Neo starts off on his journey with Trinity to Machine City, which is the, power center of the machines who are the AI.
Yeah.
And as they're about to leave, there's just something wrong with the ship, which the whole crew previously just regenerated the ship and it's ready to go. So there's something wrong. Maybe there's a little power switch that has to be flicked. Trinity goes down and she finds Bane, and he's talking in this certain manner, and I don't know why she didn't get it right away, but it's Smith.
Yeah.
Bane. Smith.
I mean, at no point has there ever been an agent or any program within the Matrix leaving the Matrix like that through Houdini's body. So it's not necessarily as a human being fathomable that could happen.
Yeah. So they have a little fight scene, and then Neo comes down to try and see what's going on with Trinity, and she's like, it's Bane, he's insane. And then him and Bane have a little bit of a fight, and then Bane is like, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah. Mr. Anderson. Yeah. And they have their kind of duel there, the one-on-one again, without Trinity. And at that point, Bane blinds Neo
with a electrical cable.
Oh, that was gruesome.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, and his eyes are just completely sealed and like flesh
gross,
melted.
Puffy,
yeah.
But Neo can still see. He has the Matrix vision in the real world.
So while that whole coma thing helped him realize that he could be connected both physically and non-physically. He can separate his mind from his body.
Yeah.
And he can see the Matrix, where he can see machines and their knowledge network, kind of, and their electricity network. That's what he can see. So he learns after he's blinded that he can still see where these machines are and how they interact with their environment.
Right.
So that's what he learns there from that fight. Mm-hmm. And he kills Agent Smith Bane there. And they continue on their journey to the absolutely impossible to reach Machine City.
Yes. Again, via visions that Neo's had in the past. We got to get back to Zion now. And
yes,
we're in the main docks, which sits above the actual city of Zion. And the machines burrow down into the docks. And we get the crazy fight scene with the mechs and the turrets and the people with the RPGs and everything else kind of happening.
Great scene, but also they have a lot of campy stuff in it.
This is where there's an hour of side character quest. Again, this is where the kid, he enlists and he becomes an ammunitions kind of guy for the mechs.
A reloader.
Yeah.
For Captain Mifune.
Yes.
Who, he actually has quite a following just for his scenes in that.
Yeah.
And he's just a badass in a mech suit, and he's just like, and shooting all of the sentinels.
Yeah, exactly.
In his mech suit,
So, while the battle rages on, obviously, there's the tunnelers, which people are blowing up so that they can't tunnel into the main city. We've got all the 100,000 sentinels flying through, murdering everyone. And in all of this chaos, the city realizes that there's one ship returning. And so we kind of have this last, epic run to the main door because they can't even open it anymore because of all the technological stuff that the Sentinels have done. So they shoot the door open just in the nick of time for the crew of all of those 3 ships to fly in and hit the EMP and blow up every Sentinel in the area, basically.
Which turns out to be amazing at first, and then 20 minutes later, the rest of the Sentinels show up, and they have just disabled every mechanical thing in the area, including all of their own defense systems.
Yes.
So now, at this point, the city of Zion and the commander, I believe Locke, says, to these heroes...
Locke is pissed.
Locke is pissed. The heroes who just showed up in this, they drove through this crazy tunnel and then set off the MP, saved the moment.
Yeah.
And then he shows up and he's like, yeah, you just saved this minute, but in 5 minutes, these other Sentinels are going to show up because they know our defenses are down. Now all we can do is burrow in with our last ditch attempt.
Basically hold a single door, essentially.
Yeah, to their temple.
Yeah.
And which is the last of the living civilization of humans.
Think the last stand in the second Lord of the Rings movie, where at Helm's Deep, kind of that last stand that they make.
Yeah.
So we just condensed an hour of film into 5 minutes there.
Yeah.
So we're making good time on this movie.
Yeah, not bad compared to our previous 2.
Yeah. So meanwhile, we go back to Neo and Trinity, who have made their way to the Machine City. They're basically attacked by a group of machines.
Yeah, they emerge on the surface of the planet because they've been all underground since now. And so they emerge on the surface. And, of course, we have, a flashback to the first movie where Morpheus shows Neo what happened to the world. Mm-hmm. So that's what we see again. And it's just a massive landscape of machines just dominating everything. And Neo's blind at this point, but he starts to get in touch with that golden glow vision that he has, where he can see the network of machines. And he looks at Trinity and he's like, "Are we above the fields?" And she's like, yeah. And it's the fields of human batteries.
Yeah.
And
the babies, basically. They're growing humans.
Yeah, yeah. Which the machines are feeding off. And you can see all of the like electricity going to this massive city. And there's all these clouds and just a desolate landscape of just pure desperation. Like, it's just all absolutely terrible from a human perspective. So they are flying the ship and they're trying to avoid detection so that they can make it as far as they can.
Well, they're caught.
Basically. Yeah.
And
they get
caught. On the way to the city, they're caught, and hundreds of machines and these massive like turret things attack them. So they go up.
They go above the clouds.
They go above the clouds. So Trinity is the first human being to see the real sky in probably 600 years by my count.
Yeah.
And then they head back down. They crash, and Trinity dies.
Yeah. Yeah. She gets...
Tragically.
Neo doesn't see it, of course, because he's blind at this point and he can only see machine activity.
Yeah.
And Trinity is impaled by a bunch of different, like, rebar, basically, like, machine spikes.
Yeah.
So she has a long-winded speech about death and love and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So that sets Neo on a path, and she says, basically... Like, I loved you as much as I could, and I lived with you as long as and, like, you've revived me once, and I got everything I could out of that extra time, because right before I previously died, I didn't say how much I loved you, and then, anyway, she dies tragically, but Neo is given this new perspective of moving on for humanity and for life and for Trinity partially, but it's not so much for Trinity anymore, it's for a bigger purpose. So he walks with his supervision into the depths of the Machine City.
Also known as 01.
That makes sense, coding wise. 01, yeah.
And there we meet the leader of the machines, who kind of comes in the form of a baby face of all these other machines kind of operating together.
It was like a bunch of sentinels that created a speaking face and reactive face.
Yes, and the name of that leader is Deus Ex Machina.
Deus Ex Machina?
Yep, that's the god of the machines.
Which makes sense cinematically.
Yep. Yeah. So at this point, Neo basically pleads his case and says that Smith is going to take over all of the Matrix, and he's not going to stop there. He wants to burn it all.
Yeah, basically. He's going to keep going because Smith has become so obsessed with the fact that there is no meaning to this.
Yeah. There's
no meaning to life, and there's no meaning to, like, trying to form this meaning.
Yeah.
He's just pure desolation, basically.
Yeah, and so initially Deus Ex Machina is not buying this, but Neo kind of pleads his case and does kind of broker a deal to basically go back into the Matrix, stop Smith, and in exchange for this, the machines will barter a truce with Zion, basically, and not destroy Zion again. And so then Neo gets jacked back into the Matrix, and we got our last kind of fight. It feels heavy.
It is heavy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of meaning behind, like, why Smith is fighting so hard, and, like, you really see, like, how he, like, had it all set up, and he knew what was happening, especially because now he has the Oracle eyes.
Yeah.
And he faces Neo saying, I knew that this day would happen, and all you see on the outskirts of this desolate city, because he has taken over the Matrix.
He's simulated the entire population.
The entire population is all Smiths.
Yeah.
And they're all just watching from the windows of these broken buildings and from the sidelines. And he says, I don't even need any of them. I'm going to fight you one-on-one.
Yeah.
Because this is how it ends.
Yeah, and I know that I beat you, basically.
Yeah.
Because again, he's simulated the Oracle, and he can see everything.
But yeah. So they fight, and they had some amazing scenes there where it's just pouring rain because Smith has taken over the Matrix, and like it's a place where human misery would exist, and it's just pouring heavy rain.
So we get this epic fight, and then Neo is defeated.
Yeah.
And he accepts his defeat and allows Smith to basically assimilate him as well.
Yes. But right before Smith, he really thinks he fucking won.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, I've seen this moment.
Yeah.
And right now, I know I'm supposed to say something. It's almost like he's experiencing deja vu. And he's like, this is the exact moment where I say the thing that ends it all.
Yeah.
And then he just forgets for a second. And then he says a quote, which is, everything that has a beginning has an end, Neo. Which is said by the Oracle in the second movie, or it's said previously by the Oracle.
Yeah.
And that shows where the Oracle became assimilated by Smith. And she held on to one last little bit of herself within Smith to break through at that last moment to tell Neo that he has to die, because she had previously mentioned in this third movie that Neo and Smith are about balance.
Yes.
They balance each other perfectly. And for one to destroy the other would rise. So she knew that Neo wouldn't be able to destroy Smith. And Smith wouldn't, if he destroyed Neo, it would be horrible. So basically, she explained through this last line, everything that has a beginning has an end. And he knew that he had to become assimilated by Smith in that moment.
Right.
And that is what allowed so as soon as Smith put his his assimilating hand into his body, and he assimilated him the same way as he assimilated everything else in the Matrix. That allowed the connection between Neo's real body in real life in Machine City that was just been jacked in by the leader of the Machine City, Deus Ex Machina, to force all of Machine City's power into every single Smith that existed in the Matrix at that point.
Right.
And that's why all of their eyes all burned out, and they opened their mouths in agony, and just light poured out. And it destroyed every single Smith iteration within the Matrix at that time.
Yeah. So they basically everybody's tricked Smith into assimilating Neo, essentially, at this point in time.
Yeah. And so within that, Neo had brokered a deal with the Deus Ex Machina, leader of the machines, to leave the humans alone. And we go into our next scene.
So at this point in time, Neo looks like he's dead, and the machines carry his body away, kind of thing. Back in Zion, we see all of the other Sentinels who have arrived at this point don't attack, and instead they turn and leave. So everybody celebrates.
Yeah, and
the war is over.
And again, it's the kid, and he runs through and he meets like the leader, and he's like, he did it! Neo did it! Yeah. And then he runs through and he's like, we're free, and everyone just like, massive celebration.
Yeah.
And then, so the very last scene, we go back into the Matrix, and we see, like, everything that Smith did kind of gets erased. And then we see Sadie from earlier, and she gets up and she goes back to the Oracle, who's sitting on a park bench, and she creates a sunset for Neo, and she says, like, do you think we'll see Neo again? And the Oracle says, we'll see the one again.
Yeah.
And then she also speaks with the architect.
They basically agreed that peace is, like, brokered at this point, that there's a truce. And the architect says, this isn't going to last forever. And the Oracle says that it'll last as long as it needs to, basically.
Yeah.
And then they agree that any humans that want to leave the Matrix will be allowed to.
Yeah. And she kind of says that, like, change is good. This is a good change. And he's like basically he's saying, like, why would you go through all this effort? And she just basically says, like, change is good.
Yeah, and it kind of, the way that the movie ends is Seraph asking the Oracle if she knew all of this was going to happen, and she says that she didn't know, but she believed.
Yeah,
and that's kind of where we end, is on that belief.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's
Yeah.
all you need to know going into...
there's more.
Messing with you. The Matrix as a universe it's kind of interesting, because it's kind of one of the first cinematic universes that kind of, alongside Star Wars and a couple others, but it's one of the first in the 20th century to kind of have all of this extended universe and a lot of extra kind of things going on. And one of those things is the Animatrix, actually, which comes out, I believe, between the Matrix Revolutions and the Resurrections. It's a series of short films, each about 15 minutes in length or so. There's 9 of them. It works out to about an hour 40. And they're animated, as the title would maybe suggest. And they add in, like, filler detail into the other movies, add supplementary information, maybe explore the world a little bit. Each one kind of has a very different feel to it.
There's
very different,
like, prequel, and then more details during.
Yeah.
And is there some after as well? Or no, not
no
yet.
After, no. So I watched the Animatrix, actually. It's my first time watching it earlier this week. I would say the short films can kind of vary between really good to kind of a complete waste of time, apart from maybe 1 or 2 concepts that get explored. So I'm just going to very quickly touch on these. Honestly, you don't need to watch the Animatrix to be following along with the 4th film. I honestly don't think that any of this is required information really at all, but I'm going to really quickly fly through this. So first we have the final flight of the Osiris. So this is kind of like a Rogue One, a Star Wars Rogue One kind of feel to it, where essentially we see a ship accidentally stumble upon the army of Sentinels who are burrowing from the top of the earth into Zion. And so they're the ones that actually let Niobe know that this is what's happening. And they're killed trying to get this information out. And that's why Niobe knows, and they have... This is kind of the intro to The Matrix Reloaded, where basically all of the captains are talking about this army approaching Zion. So following that, we have the second Renaissance, which has 2 parts to it. This one's the best out of all 9 of them, part 1 and part 2. And this is a prequel shown from the perspective of the machines, of how the war was initiated, the original war between humans and machines, how the machines tried to live in coexistence and the humans wouldn't allow it, and eventually how the robots took over the world and enslaved the human race as they had once been enslaved, and made them into batteries able to live their lives out in the Matrix, kind of thing. Really good, very graphic. We see the first humans being forced into the Matrix, like, very viscerally, with all of the spikes. Yeah, like all of the wires, like Neo kind of was jacked in originally to his pod. We see them, and that was haunting. That'll last in my memory forever, basically.
Throughout the Matrix films, we see anyone outside of the Matrix that is also, like, part of the Matrix. They have all those, like, tubes going into the back of their head. They're like the jacks. It's like a audio port for your aux cable.
Yes,
exactly. So they have those, like, and they're put into them surgically or whatever.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you saw them. I haven't seen these, so you're saying you saw them just, like, stab them in directly through the flesh.
And you know, the humans are awake and aware of this, and so they're, like, moaning and screaming. Because
the machines don't care.
Yeah.
They're just trying to figure this out.
It was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah.
It was good. I honestly, if you're gonna watch any of these, I would highly recommend looking up the second Renaissance Part 1 and Part 2 and see if you can find those 2, because those 2 were really good, and really, it's the machine's point of view, so not necessarily a reliable narrator here either. Like, they paint the machines in maybe a better light than what actually happened. So, but great short stories there. I think that's really all I wanted to bring up. The only other thing, I guess, with it is it does introduce O1, the machine city that's actually in the Middle East, is where they develop it. They decided to build it in the cradle of humanity, basically.
Of course.
And again, they say that they tried to live out in peace and that it was the humans who brought the war to them.
Yeah.
Very questionable. Unreliable narrator there.
The victor gets to write the history.
Exactly. After that, we have Kid's story, which is the kid, providing some extra light on kind of his past and how he exited the Matrix. And he actually was able, what they call self-substantiation. So he actually was able to extract himself from the Matrix without any extra aid.
So nobody else, like Morpheus, they didn't give him the pill, they didn't give him the program or anything.
He wanted out, basically. He didn't think that reality was real. He was having dreams that seemed more real than reality, and the agents come for him, basically, and Neo warns him. Neo actually calls him up on the phone, very similar to how Morpheus kind of does in the first movie, and tells him he needs to get away. And the kid at the beginning sees in his dreams that he jumps off of his school's roof and dies, and so he does the same thing thinking Neo saves him, but instead he saves himself. He pulls himself out of the Matrix that way. So that's kind of an interesting backstory to the kid, which that actually
gives more possibilities within the Matrix.
Yeah, it gives more possibilities, and that's kind of one thing that the Animatrix does do very well, is give more possibilities within the Matrix.
Yeah, honestly, anything that extends just a little bit the core concepts, like, I wish we got this for several other series and movies.
Yeah, there's so much extra content in here, and that's actually something I was going to bring up later, is that this was actually the Wachowskis' intention. They wanted people to be as passionate and as interested in the world that they developed as they were, and they wanted to give people with that passion kind of these extra little pieces out in the world for them to kind of collect and digest themselves, kind of thing. And that's why a lot of what I'm going to talk about, the really important stuff that I'm trying to hit on from the other supplementary material, it could be important because that's the mindset that the Wachowskis had back then, and I can't imagine it changing too drastically.
Yeah, I feel like they had so much time to really dream up, like, what could be at this point that we're entering the resurrection.
Yeah. So the next one's called Program. So this is actually something that we haven't mentioned yet, but we probably should have in the first movie, is that people can enter separate matrices, like offline matrices, which are programs basically designed by the humans. And you could actually download into your mind different training programs. There's a very famous line where Neo goes, "I know Kung Fu now." And then and they're downloading all the different martial arts. At one point, Trinity downloads how to fly a helicopter. This kind of happens throughout the films. So in the short film Program, we get one of the heroine of this short is in samurai times, just kind of training as a samurai, basically. And one of her friends kind of comes in through the program. They kind of duel, they talk, friendly banter, and then he kind of posed the question to her if she regrets at all taking the red pill. And she says no, basically. And then he kind of says, well, I am, and I've blocked the signal so that nobody can see us talking here in the real world. And I want to go back, and I've brokered a deal so that we can go back. Will you come with me? Because I don't want to do this alone. And she says, no. Now I can't unknow what I know now.
Yeah.
And so they basically have a fight to the death because he can't let her go without her accepting it because she would be the death of him back in the real world. And so they have this crazy battle, and he says, I've already sent the information to the machines, they're on their way. And she beats him, and they get out, and she finds out that it was all a test, and that her team, she was new to coming out, and that she passed the test. She didn't accept that. So kind of an interesting concept that's maybe a bit more widespread than we initially see with Cypher kind of thing. yeah, so that's kind of where that's important. World record we see is another next short film. It's basically we see like a Usain Bolt running for the Olympics, and he ends up pushing his body beyond the limit of what's possible.
Yeah.
And he breaks, like, one of his muscles kind of disintegrates or whatever during the race, and he actually runs through it, and the agents watching realize that he's actually gonna break the Matrix because he's running past what the human body is able to do. Yeah. And so he actually does. He runs so fast that suddenly the Matrix like flickers for him basically, and he sees like everything as it is, like a program. Yeah. And the agents aren't able to stop him from that. So then the agents stop him eventually. Oh yeah, no, sorry, I forgot about this. So then he all sees all the Matrix and everything, and then his brain actually, because he sees this, wakes up in his pod and sees everything going on, and it completely blows his mind essentially. Yeah. And so a Sentinel comes and like shoots him back into the Matrix, and he breaks a world record at this point, but then he's crippled from all of this, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so the short ends with him in the wheelchair and being wheeled out, like completely unresponsive kind of thing, and the agents watching. But then he gets up and he stands up from the wheelchair, and the agents like freak out because he walks away.
Yeah. So, when he's like supposed to be paralyzed or something and like stuck in a state. Yeah.
So the important part of this short is that essentially people can wake themselves up from.
Yeah. There's so many. There are like probably at least 1 billion people still left being used as batteries. Yep. Maybe 7 billion.
No, it's probably about that much.
Yeah.
Because there's to get into that. That's probably not relevant.
Anyways,
but...
So there's a lot of people left, and so the amount of variation of running all these simulations for all of these brains, there's got to be a certain amount of Anomalies, yeah. So we only see a certain story of anomalies. Obviously, there's all these small ones, like that guy breaking the speed.
Yeah, speaking of anomalies, the next one, Beyond, follows a woman who loses her cat, and on her and while she's searching for her cat, she runs around a group of boys who tell her that it might be at the haunted house. So they all go to this haunted house, which is actually a spot where the Matrix system is weak. Oh. And so they could kind of like abuse physics and stuff. Yeah. And while they're having fun, a group of agents detect that there's a glitch here. Yeah. And so they come in and it like whole hazmat, like clean up everybody, like take everybody out and force everybody out. And the way this one ends is she goes back and to this place and everything's gone. Like all the kids are trying to like do the stuff and it's paved over. It's a parking lot now. Yeah. So that one was okay too.
I like the little worlds that they're building there, the little stories. Yeah. I have to watch these.
Yeah, it's worth a watch if you're a big super fan of
I'm going to watch them before we go see the fourth.
Yeah, good. The next one's actually probably my least favorite. It's called A Detective Story, and it's kind of like the film noir kind of detective-y kind of thing, like that you can picture like the black and white kind of style. And so this guy is hired anonymously to find the hacker Trinity. And so he figures out that like the other detectives who have been sent on this task before have all ended up crazy or have gone missing or have died basically. So he finds her in a train, and then she detects that the agents have been following him. And so those two try to get away, and so they're running away, and they get to their own cart, and they're talking, and then he starts to kind of flicker, like one of the agents is starting to take him over, because he's not out of the Matrix, though. He's a blue pill inside the Matrix, and she shoots him and says, "I'm sorry, but I can't let you turn." So they kind of have a back and forth, and then she leaves kind of thing. But this is kind of showcasing, like, the only thing that's relevant is that Trinity's in it, and that, like, it shows a bit of her backstory, but also, like, just shows that you can stop an agent if you shoot the person in time kind of thing. But, like I said, this one's probably my least favorite. Yeah. And then our last one, Matriculated. And this one's kind of weird. This one feels a little different too. This one, I don't know when it takes place, but there's actually a group of humans who have a lab on the surface what they've been doing is capturing machines and converting them over to the human side. So what they do is they enter the Matrix with the machines, and they take them on this like psychedelic journey to show them like the positive traits about humanity and why humanity can be good. And then they convert the machines over. And then at the end of the film, the machines find them, and there's kind of a battle between the good machines, the bad machines, and the humans. All of the humans are wiped out, all of the Sentinels are wiped out, and just one remaining good human kind of survives.
Yeah, okay.
So again, it's a bit of a different take. It was kind of interesting, but probably not super relevant to everything going on. So that's the Animatrix in a nutshell. Again, if you're a big fan of the Matrix, it's worth watching as supplementary material, but you're not missing a ton heading into the Resurrections.
Yeah.
Not watching that. And then we're done. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, of course there's more.
There's honestly like so much out there. I spent literally an entire day today.
Yeah, you could go pretty far into even just the erotica of this, like I did last night.
I'm sure you did. All right, so there are a few things that are kind of maybe relevant to the fourth movie that I do want to touch on before we kind of wrap up here. So the first, there's a series of Matrix comics out there. Most of them aren't written by the Wachowskis, but there are some notable people who have written them. Like Neil Gaiman has wrote a comic. Yeah,
really?
And he said that he's really proud of the one that he read. So if you're into comics, there's some good stuff out there. There was actually re-released back in 2019, I believe, or 2020, because they knew the fourth movie was coming out. So it's accessible. You can find this stuff either online or your local comic store, whatever.
Maybe a library.
Might be a library, yeah. And a lot of this, I read through kind of the synopsis of most of these because I'm not a big comic book fan myself, but they're mostly complements to the main series. And most of them actually don't include characters from the films, or if anything, maybe they're kind of background, like they're just kind of mentioned briefly, or maybe they're in the back having lunch somewhere or whatever kind of thing. The one thing I do want to mention from the Matrix comics, because this is something that you and I talked about in the last podcast, is what happens to the humans that are possessed by the agents.
Yeah.
And so there's actually a comic that explains it.
Awesome.
It's called Day In, Day Out. And what happens is that the humans who are possessed or assimilated by the agents are placed in a coma, virtually, and they're just returned to consciousness if they survive, basically.
So similar to what we saw with Sati in the last,
exactly.
Yeah, because everybody was taken over in the third film. So we see her later wake up, and we see the Oracle again.
Yep.
So obviously they were put in like a certain state of a pause function state.
So they wake up confused, and if they've been actually hurt, like if the agent was in battle, they would feel all of that, because the agent itself is using the host as a shell, essentially. So the agent doesn't really feel any pain, which is kind of like pretty devious, actually.
Yeah.
So after that, we have a couple of games. The first is Enter the Matrix. I'm really not going to touch on this one, other than it's kind of a bridge between the first and the second movie. And it also complements some of the Animatrix stories, like the last flight of the Osiris. It's directly references that. And they actually filmed during the second and third movie. They filmed scenes for that. So there's some exclusive scenes in that game. But again, it's more just kind of bridge between the first and second movie. It's not essential necessarily to our viewing of Resurrections. The big important one that I do want to get to right now, though, is The Matrix Online, a massive MMO. I believe it was out from 2005 to 2009, and then it was shut down after that. It's a continuation of events after the Matrix Revolutions. And it's officially stated that the plot points of the game were all approved by the Wachowskis.
So it's all canon. Wow.
It probably is all canon, and I'm gonna walk you through some of the details here, because there is stuff that we can pretty much already confirm, and the questions that you might have from the trailer as you've watched them already might even be answered by what I'm about to talk about here. So it confirms, first of all, we start with the Prime program, and it confirms that the Prime program was not reinserted into the Matrix. So the Matrix was reloaded after the events of the third movie, but the Prime program, they didn't put Neo's stuff back in there, which means there's no longer a path to the one. There's no longer that program, because it's not necessary to have it anymore. And that's because of the deal that Neo made to allow the humans to leave the Matrix if they choose. The machines actually create like a friendly agent, essentially, to kind of help facilitate that and kind of be the middleman between.
So like Smith, but opposite.
Yeah, like exactly.
Except for not Neo, but like, because Neo's the opposite.
And apparently it has a sense of humor too, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, interesting.
I'm like, I could see that being very fun.
And yeah, and so something that's also very important here is that the machines explicitly state that neither Neo or Trinity's bodies were recycled. And so what that means is, going back to the first movie, something we didn't touch on, is that humans that die, they recycle them, which means that they liquefy them and feed them into the other humans. So, their body is not recycled. What gets done to them? We don't know. But Morpheus is demanding of the machines to return Neo's body, which they refuse to do. And so Morpheus gets kind of pissed off here at this point. Separately, people online discover that Neo's split his code, his RSI, which is basically like his avatar essentially, into pieces and fragments throughout the Matrix, because before he died, he thought they might be useful in the future. So basically, there's all these different groups who discover this and are hunting down fragments of the RSI, and there's even kind of a group that knows how to manipulate it to access the code kind of thing. As well, a new kind of group enters the foray at this point, known as the Red Eye Agents. So they're a rogue group of agents that aren't happy with the truce that took place between machine and human.
That makes sense.
And they end up creating better versions of themselves through Neo's RSI code. They're called N30 agents, so like Neo agents.
Yeah.
So they're more powerful. Meanwhile, while this is going on, Morpheus decides, because Zion isn't willing to go along with Morpheus either. Morpheus is a man on his own path kind of thing.
They never really were. Yeah. They were, of course, happy with the results of his things going on, his plans that worked out. Yeah. But they were never like, this all makes sense. I'm going with this guy.
Right.
They were like, it worked out this time, but we can't trust him.
Yeah, exactly. So
he's a zealot.
So Morpheus begins sabotaging the Matrix to force the machines to return his body. So what he does is he plants bombs, essentially. And what it does is the bombs blow up and it messes with the Matrix, and every human being around is instantly made aware of the fact that they're in the Matrix and this isn't the real world. Okay. So he's forcefully pulling people out of the Matrix.
It's like a red pill bomb.
Yeah. And people who wouldn't necessarily be ready for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So at this point, everybody turns on Morpheus, basically. So Zion and the machines. There's still like Niobe and a few other people who like wouldn't be against Morpheus, but just about everybody is against Morpheus at this point. So Morpheus, while he's planting one of his bombs, is ambushed by a program known as the Assassin and kills Morpheus. And that is maybe why we haven't seen Morpheus in any of the trailers, and why there's a new Morpheus kind of around. Because later in this, and I'm not going to get into it any further than that because it gets kind of convoluted, but a new Morpheus does show up in the game as well.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So it's heavily implied that the assassin was hired by the Merovingian to assassinate Morpheus, and that the assassin's actually an exile disposal program, so it was one of the liquefiers kind of thing.
Yeah, and one of the disposal programs, was that not the father of, or the mother of Sadie?
Yeah, it might be the father, yeah.
So they were both very similar. They had a good vibe, but obviously there could be versions that exist outside of the regular Matrix that could be nefarious, that obviously the Merovingian would latch onto and use.
Yeah. So Niobe, angered by this, grabs a group of operatives together, and they find and kill the assassin. And then Niobe, realizing that it was probably the Merovingian who was behind this all, starts going after him as well, learning that his ultimate goal is still to eliminate the Oracle so that he can be basically the all-powerful being of the Matrix and do whatever he wants. while this is all going on back in Zion, the humans maybe aren't following all the pieces of the truce. The humans assume that a second war is going to happen. They want to be prepared. So they actually set up a second city and stockpile it full of supplies, like EMPs, stuff like that kind of thing. They call it New Zion. Well, the machines find out about that. They consider that a violation of the truce, so they destroy the original Zion.
The original Zion. They're like, you make a new one, we take your old one.
Yeah,
okay?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's as far as I'm going to get into plot points, I think, that are relevant. There are a couple of groups that I quickly want to mention that might be relevant to the fourth movie. So our first group is called the Cypherites, and they're one of the first groups to kind of emerge. And they're a rogue group of humans who, by the name might sound, believe in the Cypher kind of belief system of the real world is garbage. We want back in. We want to be like, we don't want to be red pills anymore. We want to be forced back into the Matrix.
They want to be full blue.
Yeah, they want to be full blue. So they
got blue blood.
Their main goal is to re-enter the Matrix. We have the group called EPN, which is E Pluribus Neo, which is another extremist group on the opposite side of the Cypherites, and it's led by the Kid.
Of course.
And he's pushing to free everyone.
Yeah.
And again,
no matter what they want.
No matter what
everyone's
they want.
free.
Everyone to be free. Yeah. And that goes against the truce. That goes against like everything that Zion and the machines have agreed upon.
Yeah.
Our last main important character to maybe be aware of heading into the fourth movie is the General. So the General is a rogue machine program who kind of seems like he might be a good guy. He plays a lot of sides in the game, and eventually it's revealed that he was actually the commander of the army of Sentinels that were attacked Zion originally.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he wasn't happy with the truce either.
Yeah.
So he's still trying to take down Zion. He's been playing the long con in here for a while, playing a lot of different sides. And he pretty much aligns with just about everyone at one point or another during the game. And he's also the one who powered up the agents as well. So very important character.
Yeah.
So
we're seeing a lot of sort of what we would expect from like an AI, where certain, like, there's branches and there's adaptations that don't agree with each other, just like we kind of saw in the original trilogy. And there's a lot of different groups. I don't know if we're going into this yet, but what I haven't seen yet is a faction that I would expect to be involved in this universe that says that, why don't we join forces again? Why do not the humans and the machines join as one and like go into this singularity of both combined, the best of both worlds?
Yeah, there isn't really that. Like, the best that there is from my reading is that kind of like loose truce between humans and machines to not affect each other. And honestly, if you go back into the history and watch the second Renaissance, you'll understand why. There's a lot of bad blood between humans.
Yeah.
Especially as well, like, once you've learned the fact that we're on the 6th iteration, and it says at one point that it's approximately 100 years, because, you know, you have Neo, who's about 30, let's say 30 here.
33 probably.
Yeah, let's say 33. So let's say he goes on to do another iteration. So at 33, he takes 23 individuals out. He lives, he dies, let's say the age of 70, so that's 40 years. And then there's the prophecy that another one will eventually come along to save the human race. So if maybe you wait another 30 years there, 40 years. So we're almost 100 years there. So we're 6 iterations. So we're 600 years from the initial kind of war. So we're going on like over half a millennia of war between the humans and the machines. Like, that doesn't change overnight.
But it just, I'm not thinking within the universe anymore. I'm just thinking like as a viewer and as someone who I kind of keep up with like the discussions within AI and stuff. I'm just interested in that. I'm not an expert by any means, but one, like, transhumanism is very much a belief. And what we see of the universe is that they're still very much like they still understand some history. They don't know that much of human history really, but you'd think that at a certain point there would be this like middle ground that says as soon as you know that humans created the AI, then you kind of understand why they did, and it's because humans have been using tools for so long, and that eventually their tools outgrew them, and they had a war.
Right.
But you would think that there would be this faction that says, "Why don't we join together the best of both worlds again?"
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking might be
maybe that
in the fourth.
Yeah, and maybe that heads into the future more. But at this point in time, there's a lot of fresh wounds still there between each faction.
Yeah.
There's also some other factions that gets explored in the Matrix Online. Like I said, the vampires and the werewolves have different gangs, so they're involved there. And again, there's a lot of turning between each person. Like it sounds like it was a cool game. I kind of wish that I played it way back in the day. But because
there's probably a simulator or what are those called?
Yeah, I think you can find copies of it online, but you're not going to get the MMO experience. It's just going to be like learning the plot points.
Yeah,
I had a hard time even finding like on YouTube the cutscenes and stuff like that from it. But the story sounds fantastic. Like I'm pretty invested in all of this here, and I hope that they continue on with some of this.
Yeah, I'm sure after this resurrection.
Yeah, maybe, and you know what? Even maybe we'll get a rebooted game or something like that, which could be cool.
Yeah, that'd be unreal.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, but that's it for my kind of Matrix Online kind of discussion. Like I said, I think there's actually some crucial components to that are important to the films, but that's everything that you probably need to know kind of going into them. So we could wrap it up here, or we could talk about fun internet theories and our own theories if we have any that we want to discuss.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
All right.
Let's wrap it up here and then continue.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, this is everything that you probably need to know going into the film. If you want to stick around and hang out with us for a little while longer, we're going to talk some internet theories and some maybe crazy nutjob theories that I came up with. It's only 2 at this point, but yeah, just some interesting stuff from the internet that have come to light that I'm various levels of invested in at this point.
Yeah, looking forward to this.
All right, let's talk first theory. This one's kind of an obvious one. It's kind of big. It kind of hit the scene maybe 2 years ago or so, and I saw it on a few different news places too. Agent Smith is the actual one.
Well, yes.
So Neo destroyed Smith, who was then reborn into the Matrix, which fits into prophecy that the man has to be born within the Matrix, because Neo technically isn't born within the Matrix. Again, he dies and comes back, so I think you can fit it in there. But the one is prophesized to destroy the Matrix and manipulate it as he saw fit. And yes, Neo can do things within the Matrix, but it really was Smith who manipulated the Matrix to make it his world, right?
Yeah, like he very much was the first program to start adapting and learning. So yeah, I could see how that would happen.
That's where things get a little interesting here, because if Smith is the one, then technically Neo is the father of the one. And additional kind of interesting piece to this fan theory, the Oracle deceived everyone so that she can manipulate the system behind the scenes to her benefit. And she guided the events that led to his rebirth as the one. So technically she's his mother. And when Sati and Seraph are assimilated by Smith, and the Oracle has her last conversation with Smith, and she asks what happened with those two, and he tells her that he assimilated them basically, and she says, "You bastard."
Yeah.
And he goes, "You would know, wouldn't you, Mom?"
Mom, yeah.
So he calls her Mom, which is interesting.
Yeah, and it's like subtle, and it's never mentioned again, and it's just there. And even the fact that he assimilated Sati and Seraph, like he only mentions it through the cookies line. So yeah, that's definitely like that whole mother, father, and son iteration movement going on. Yeah.
So theory within a theory here, because like even that, like I think you could argue there's two different theories, that Agent Smith's the one, and that potentially the Oracle did create Smith in one way or another.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. She might
have been even like the person to create the agents to bring balance to the Matrix, right?
Yeah, because she said that she's there to unbalance things.
Yep.
And maybe by
go ahead.
Yeah, like maybe by creating the Smiths, she created an unbalance, and now she's trying to recorrect that balance. Mm-hmm. So as soon as she created the unbalance, she was like, okay, well, I have to bring back the balance, so let's set up this whole other thing. Yeah. So she might be the first, it's like the first mutation.
Yeah.
And that's why she's the Oracle. She understands the most about each side. Mm-hmm. So she understands the computers, and she understands the humans. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Great character. Like,
the Oracle's fantastic.
Absolutely, yeah. The fact that she changed bodies and they kind of glossed over whatever.
There's more explanation of it. Like they kind of explain in the movie, but there's actually more explanation of it online. Do you want me to tell you? So what happens between the second and third movie is the Merovingian actually succeeds. The deal that he brokers with the family to take Sati is to give him the codes to the Oracle.
Yeah.
And so he destroys her initial shell, and she finds a new shell essentially.
Yeah. I from what I read as well, that's she had to find a new shell.
Yep.
So that she could continue living. So she didn't get taken, obviously. Yeah.
Yep.
But it's just the fact that the original actress, who was great, passed away.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. So further kind of information on this theory, I would recommend going to Film Theory, which is a YouTube channel. They have a really great video on Agent Smith being the one, which summarizes a lot of the internet discussion on it. I highly recommend it. It was really interesting. I'm 50-50 on this one. Like, I don't know if I like the idea or don't like the idea in this one. And it could be very much valid. It doesn't really affect the overall arc of the story necessarily. Yeah. Our next internet theory, the Matrix within the Matrix theory.
Yes.
So that the real world is just another layer of the Matrix.
So it's the first Inception.
Yes.
Yeah.
The first layer of Inception.
Yeah. So I don't know where they would think this. Obviously, we would now think this, just thinking back on it, but there's no indication of it. But there was...
there is some indication, potentially, because the support that I found for the theory online is that Neo's able to use his powers outside of the Matrix and see kind of the same, like, Matrix kind of vision that he does. And Smith controlling Bane outside the Matrix, because this wasn't thought possible, but an easy explanation would be that he's just a program moving from one system to another.
Yeah, like, that's I guess, the only logical way to go. Yeah.
But again, like you were going to say just now, like, it would almost kind of make sense that the machines would have levels of fail-safes, basically, in order to keep the humans under a level of control. And we even see that, right? Like, the manipulation that the machines perform over Neo is pretty extensive. Like, they set him on this path of the one, the whole, like, Messiah complex, like, everything is kind of... different systems of control. So why not have another layer of control being another level of the Matrix?
Yeah, it just takes away from the whole urgency, the whole need, the whole story.
Yeah.
Like, if they were super beyond in control to the point that they recreated a shitty reality outside of the Matrix to house the people who thought they escaped, it would absolutely be genius, but there'd be no point to the whole film, like, everything, really.
Right.
Unless there is a very drastically different area that we're going to be seeing in the next movie.
Yeah, so I imagine the fourth movie is either going to confirm or deny this theory. Yeah. I would imagine that this theory doesn't hold water.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Our next theory. The machines take Neo's body to reload the Matrix at the end of the third movie. So we know at this point that the Matrix was reloaded based on the MMO. So we'll have to kind of see how much the fourth movie follows kind of the plot points of the MMO. I wouldn't be shocked if they take some pieces from the MMO and leave others, kind of thing. Honestly, I could see this being a pretty valid theory. Like, the Matrix would almost have to be reloaded after the third movie with Smith taking over everyone. Like, everyone having that conscious break would so detrimentally affect everyone's consciousness and like acceptance of the Matrix that you would have to reload it.
I would say that there would be almost like a new program written that's similar to the Oracle that can pick out, it's almost like a Morpheus program where it can pick out who is ready to leave the Matrix and live in the real world and who isn't and who doesn't ever want to.
And that's where that friendly agent might come into play a little bit as well, right? To facilitate that. Another film theory that I have from online is that we've already met 5 other versions of the One within the first 3 films.
Yes.
So the theory goes that the order of the previous versions are Smith, the Train Man, the twins, Hammond, Seraph, and Neo, in that order. That are the 6.
What about the Merovingian?
It's not
That's a whole other theory.
That's my theory, is that it's the Merovingian. But the main theory is that it's actually Smith was the first, and that's why Smith has such a hatred for humanity. But the Merovingian's never shown to have the powers. He's more like the mental kind of games, right? That's why he wasn't in the first iteration of this theory. I personally prefer the Merovingian in and Smith out.
Yeah, I would agree.
I really feel the Smith as a program who's learned to hate humanity over his time having to like be the shepherd of humanity.
And
basically.
it's each iteration that just spoils him a little bit more. He learns just enough.
Yeah.
And it's like his code was in a very specific path where each iteration that he had just learned a little bit just told him, like, based on the information I just learned and my original code, these humans suck.
Yeah. And we also like hear the Merovingian's wife tell Neo that they used to be more alike and that originally the Merovingian was driven by a purpose. And to me, like, that really implies the Merovingian may have been the One or previous iteration of the One.
Yeah.
And I could see if he was the very first one, after having to lived this many lives, like he's 600, like probably about 400 to 500 years into his lifetime, right? At this point, he doesn't care about humanity.
He's given into the hedonistic lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's that, and he's very much portrayed as the Hades. Hades and Persephone, who are guardians of the underworld. So they're like the underworld of the Matrix.
Right.
And they love their life down there.
Yep.
And they can control things, they can change things, they can influence.
And they've accepted that the One will eventually come and try to take whatever they've got because the Oracle will push that. But it's just a minor inconvenience over a lifetime.
Yeah, and they also understand, as being one of the first ones, that there's still a chance that they can just take power.
Yep.
So they've given up on the humanity side, and they're just enjoying their power.
Yeah.
And so
I'm fully on board with the Merovingian being the first one. I honestly, I'm pretty on board with this theory in general because the Train Man, sure. The twins, again, sure. Seraph, I really see as being a previous one. Like, I could absolutely see that. Hammond is the counselor, the older counselor that we didn't really talk about, but I could see him being the past iteration of the One who had to bring the 23 with him. And you could ask, well, why isn't he brought up that fact before? He's probably guilty, like feeling guilty as hell about the fact that he doomed the previous Zion to be destroyed. And then after that, Smith, Neo, whichever one you want at that point. But that's actually a minor other change that I made, is the original order went Hammond and then Seraph. I pressed Seraph and then Hammond next because that makes more sense to me personally, because why would Seraph have come after Hammond, who's still alive based on timelines that we know? Yeah, I like that theory a lot. Our next one is that Sentinels have a failsafe program to stop them from killing the one in the real world, and that's actually how Neo was able to stop them in Reloaded.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much a fan of that one.
I'm open to that. Yeah.
Yeah. It makes kind of Neo's abilities a little bit more make sense. The last one I want to quickly just touch on is Sati, the kid, is going to be the next Oracle. Like, she's being groomed to be the next Oracle, and helping bake cookies with the Oracle is kind of learning and the Oracle passing on her knowledge, essentially.
Yeah. And explaining that, like, each batch needs a little bit of love.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So those are the internet theories that I liked online that I wanted to quickly touch on. That also might play some sort of level of effect on the next movie. I don't know how much, but I think the Wachowskis also like to keep people guessing a little bit.
Yeah. And just one little thing, like we have a new Morpheus. We have Trinity. Will she be Carrie-Anne Moss? Carrie-Anne Moss will be back.
Yep.
And Keanu Reeves is back with a beard.
Yes.
So obviously he's going to be slightly different in this iteration.
Yep.
Because as we know, when you go into the Matrix, you see yourself in a certain way.
Yep.
So that might be, I don't know, that's just a small change. Obviously, we don't know too much other than that.
I'll tell you who we have that I want to tell you who that we have, because there's one that I read that I wish I didn't read. But we have Neo returning, Trinity returning. We have a version of Morpheus. We don't know what yet. We have Sati is coming back. The Merovingian, who's probably going to play a pretty large role.
Is he the same actor?
Yes, Lambert Wilson is back.
Oh, awesome.
And Jada Pinkett Smith.
Oh, nice.
And then I don't. There's one other character that I don't want to spoil yet. All right, so let's talk. I have a couple theories. If you have a couple theories, we'll talk about those too. So my first theory is that Neo is a program, in a more literal sense than the Prime program. This was kind of my initial theory as I was watching the films and started to develop it as time went on, and that would explain like how he's able to control the machines out in the real world, how he follows the path of the one kind of thing, and all of that. But I think now that I've done all this research, I think it's probably more similar to what he actually is, since he's kind of a representation of the anomalies. That's something that I really had to dig online to fully understand, that he's like, that they actually put the program, the Path of the One system into him to push him towards the reboot of the Matrix kind of thing.
So that it keeps all of the anomalies like going towards a certain area and then they can control it?
Yeah, basically, like I think what they do is they basically research all of the anomalies and get all of the data and put it into Neo to basically put it into one key essentially. Yeah. And then they use that key to reboot the Matrix, like fix all the issues and then reboot it kind of thing.
So are the AI then trying to improve their system, or are they just running this program over and over, just like rebooting because it works?
I can't imagine they're not trying to make improvements to the system, and that's where we get like the programs, the programs that are sent for deletion that go to exile and stuff like that. Like, I think they're always trying to update. It's like Facebook always trying to make like new iterations,
or your phone always trying to tell you to re-download the new stuff.
Exactly. So,
and this is before all that. Like, at least the original trilogy was all basically before all that.
Yeah, it's before like
update now.
The constant push of updates.
Yeah. Like, so what I'm really looking forward to is the new 20 years on modern take on what we believe technology to be like.
There's always hints to what the future looks like in sci-fi.
Yeah.
Because like the original Star Trek, I'm pretty sure, had like cell phones basically and stuff. So there's always stuff that people speculate in sci-fi that ends up coming true. So
yeah, the different versions of a future of dystopia and utopia and things like that. When you look at like Brave New World and 1984, we see elements of those today. Yeah. So when you look at other sci-fi like The Matrix, like what are we gonna see today?
Yeah,
that's what I'm so curious about, because have we like pushed past what we were thinking about back then.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because,
like, where does the Matrix go from here?
Yeah, there's so much to think about that I'm thoroughly excited to see where they take this.
Yeah.
And if this completely flops, I will be very upset.
Yeah, so will I.
I can't see it happening. I think it'll be good.
I think it'll be good. I think I'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
My last big theory, and this one's the big one. This is the one I went down the rabbit hole. I found plot points that made sense. I'm just going to quickly go over it because we don't have time to get into my brain. But the Oracle is the one who changed the game. So we're at iteration 6 at this point. Why is this iteration any different than the past iterations? Why did Neo choose to save Trinity? Because the Oracle pushed Trinity to the idea that she would fall in love with the One, and built that into the path of the One, basically. And she put the pieces in place for Neo to choose whether or not to save Trinity and humanity. Because she is, don't forget, she is the investigator of human behavior. She knew exactly what would happen if she pointed these people and put these pawns in the right spots.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is 6th iteration. What's different from this? And so the Oracle keeps harping on the fact that all of the choices were already made, and the characters needed to focus on how they would interpret the choices. She's pushing them. She's pushing them here. And I think that she was the one who made all of these choices. And that's my interpretation, is that all of the choices were made by the Oracle. And that's what she's essentially saying too, is you don't have choice anymore because I've made the choices for you. You need to read what I'm giving you so that you can come up with the solution that I'm providing you to end the war. Because that's what she wants, right?
Yeah.
Is to end the war. So I think that she set up everyone.
I don't think she tried to.
I think
it's that she had to.
No, because she that's not her program. Her program is to put the One on the path of the One in order to reload the Matrix over and over to keep the machines going. Because even the architect says at the end, you played a dangerous game. And Sephiroth asked her, is this what you expected to happen? And she says, I didn't know it was going to happen, but I believed. I believed that my choices were going to set this path, basically. I really think that the Oracle was the one who did this.
Yeah, I see that very much. Because if you really look at it, it's basically she had been experiencing Groundhog Day scenario, where she is the only one who remembers what will happen and happen and happen.
Well, and seeing hundreds of years of human behavior and learning about love and all of these other aspects of humanity that the machines don't understand, like, she's got to start to empathize with that too, right?
Yeah. One, she's bored, and one, she empathizes. Yeah. And she's, like, if you put anyone in a Groundhog Day scenario, like when you see
Bill Murray
go through it, like he like someone falls off a ladder, he picks him up, and he does it every day, and he's like, no, I'm just gonna let them fall today. But like in this scenario, she had seen all of this as an AI supercomputer. She understands every little data point that went on, and she's like, okay, if we're gonna do this again, we might as well lean it towards these guys this time. And so she starts I see where you're going with that, and that's a very good theory. Basically, we don't need anything else but the Oracle.
Yeah, that's basically it. Next time you watch it, keep that in mind, and there will be a lot of comments that get made and things that get said and actions that happen that really pushed me towards that. And I'm really confident in that theory, like that it was in there. And it's not really a main theory that I've found online kind of thing, but that's something that I'm really feeling is what happened.
It does leave it's a trope as well, though. Like, if you go into it far enough, she's like there's too many that's too easy. Yeah. Because it's almost, they call it like a Mary Sue, where it's like a fictional character who's like immune to weaknesses. And
right, but the weakness was siding with humanity. She was a program designed to keep humans in check and to design the Matrix to be as perfect as possible without like letting like the least amount of anomalies and like and things, and while also finding the person to be the one to set the right person on the path of the one to reload the Matrix at the right time.
So yeah, maybe she was just given just a little bit enough intelligence that she got bored and she's like, let's change it.
Yeah, I think she just came to grow compassion for
humans. Or boredom. Yeah. Which one is more important? We'll see in the next episode.
Yeah, exactly. That's it for my theories, though. I like I said, that one really grew on me throughout this watch. I didn't feel it until about partway through the second one is when I started to think about that and see all the like potentials where that might have occurred. I don't know if you have any other theories you want to talk about.
No, basically you hit on a bunch of them that I've seen, and my personal theories are basically very outlandish and sexual, so we'll leave them.
You spent way too much time in
the erotica version. Yeah. I didn't know that's what we were not talking. I thought we were talking about that section, so I went a little too far into that for the past 3 months.
Because that is what's going to come up in the fourth movie.
It might.
Oh, man. The Wachowskis have been reading a lot of fanfic.
And writing some, apparently.
All right. Let's do some final thoughts on the films before we wrap this up. Because we haven't talked about our thoughts.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, The Matrix Reloaded still holds up. Like, I love the ideas, the action sequences. Yeah, some of the CGI is, like, outdated now, and the effects, they were maybe the first movie the effects were groundbreaking. The second movie they tried to make the effects groundbreaking again,
but they couldn't stand, like,
they just couldn't land, like, technology wasn't ready for everything.
Yeah.
And that could have been the same issue with the first one. They just got lucky on the first one.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they introduced this new bar, and then like they're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yep.
With the first film. And then they're trying to put like a little figure standing on top of that giant, whatever. Right. Like you can't double the bar in 2 years or whatever it took for them to put out the second one.
Yep.
So people were absolutely mind blown by the first one, by the combination of elements that they created. Yeah. That when they saw the second one, they were expecting the same jump. And it didn't hit as strong. It was still very good.
Yeah.
But it didn't... The society built it... Like, everybody who's excited for the second Matrix built it up way too much.
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is they had a couple of years... They had, like, I think it was 4 years to wait between the first and second.
Yeah.
And, yeah, the second Reloaded was not what... did not meet what expectations were set for it, basically.
People still enjoyed it, and then the third...
And the other problem with it is, too, and I agree with this one online, actually, is there are points in time where they make the movie convoluted for more to confuse you than to actually, like, add to the story. Like, Colonel Sanders talks with very large words that are very hard to understand. Your first watch through, you're not going to understand everything that he's explaining to Neo.
Yeah.
It takes, like, honestly, this was helpful for me as well in understanding everything that's happening, trying to summarize it in my own words, essentially. Yeah. Because... It's complicated, and it doesn't need to be. And I understand why, because of the architect and who the architect is and everything. But at the same time, for the viewer, it's unnecessarily convoluted.
Yeah, and also, like, the second aspect, that was definitely a very important aspect to why it didn't...
why it wasn't as well received.
Yeah, it wasn't as well received. So the second one was they lost the the initial impact of, like, the lines that they were saying. Like, they had so many great lines. Like, Hugo Weaving, his monologues were absolutely amazing. Honestly, I don't think they really dropped off that much. No. His did not.
Yeah.
But everyone else's lines over the trilogy just kind of went downhill.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I didn't write this down, but this is a thought that I had partway through. I think it was at the end of the second or early third that Morpheus as a character kind of lost purpose.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I don't know
completely.
why I've never noticed that before, but like he kind of had like the Star Wars sequel trilogies issue where they just kind of lost like a purpose for Morpheus, and then he was just kind of there.
Yeah, he's like, I still believe, guys.
Yeah,
he's just in the background, like, yeah.
And he was such a great character for the first movie.
Yeah,
but...
absolutely amazing in the first, and they lost him. They stopped writing him well, and like every single one of his lines, the dreams and the waking and the his balance within what was going on in the film in the first was so important, and then nothing in the second and third.
Yeah.
Small hints of it was like a shadow of him.
Yeah. So that's where I landed too.
Yeah. And so Hugo Weaving and Agent Smith's lines were still pretty damn good.
Yep.
And his delivery was just phenomenal. But at the same time, in the second and very much in the third, they added all these like dumb, like campy slogans.
And side
lines.
Characters. They tried to make every side character be as equally badass as every other character.
Yeah.
And this is a bigger problem with the third movie on this watch that I found. That there was just so much time spent on these weaker characters that we weren't invested in at this point in time.
Like Niobe, she was worth investing in.
Yeah.
And they did a great job in how amazing of a pilot she was.
Yep.
But then Captain Maifune, the guy in like with the
shoot it like in the mech.
Yeah, he was pretty decent, but his whole line of like knuckle up, was just like it was written for 8-year-olds at that point when it used to be.
And again, he had
so
that.
Well.
They tried to give him that badass monologue and everything, and it was like this watch particular. I tried to watch this a little bit more critical than I have in the past, and that's where I was seeing kind of the faults a little bit, where he doesn't need a big epic speech. Like we've already had that. We already know what the stakes are. Like let's just keep moving things along because I care about what's happening with Neo right now. That's what I care about.
And honestly, the best scene. There's 2 scenes that are very memorable for him, and it's him just like being a badass in the suit, not saying knuckle up. Everything like saying the knuckle up ruined him, but like him just being a badass in the suit. There's a few scenes where he was good, and then his dying, where his like face is cut in half.
Yeah,
that was well done.
Yeah, I like that too. I agree. The third film to me overall just really feels really bloated. They spend all this time on all these side characters. Like we probably get through, or at least it feels like about an hour of screen time without Neo during the war and everything and the battle.
It was a boring war.
Yeah,
boring battle. Like there was
I think it could have been more concise. I always thought in the past that I really enjoyed it, but this time I struggled with it a little bit more, and I think it was the realization of the side characters, and that's a little bit something that we've seen more in like TV of recent kind of thing is if having side characters with side plots that don't really matter because we're so invested in everything else, and that's unfortunate because in a way. It's because we're so invested in the main characters and the main storylines that like adding this extra bloat in, it hurts everything else that we're so passionate about essentially. And that's why we're upset about it. It's not because, we're a bunch of grumpy internet nerds. It's because we've spent all this time with the main characters and building this connection with them only for you to tell us that we'll get to them later. Like this is the important stuff now.
And it's like they already built the world.
Yeah.
And now they're trying to throw in all these things that are just distractions.
Yeah.
And we could have went for more depth instead of breadth.
Yeah.
There. One character that I did love was Chara, and she was the girl with the buzzed head, and her and Z go out and they're trying to
with the RPGs?
Yeah, rocket down the drill.
Yeah, the diggers.
Sentinels.
Yeah.
Her scenes were great. She acted them very well.
Yeah.
And there's nothing campy about her character.
Yes.
That one was written well, and that was a good addition.
Very somber. Yeah.
Yeah. And very badass. She was like the Charlize Theron of the 2003 of that time, where like I could very much see how in Mad Max, the second one or whatever.
Yeah, Furiosa.
Yeah, Furiosa. Yeah. Furiosa. Yeah. That I could see those, like, that could have been the same actress almost.
Yeah.
Just 20 years apart.
Yeah, I agree.
15.
It's not to say that none of the side plots felt unnecessary, but we spent too much time with them.
Yeah, very much.
It could be cut down. Somewhere between the second and third movie, it kind of clicked for me that the second and third feel like two parts of a whole, while the first movie really stands up on its own. Like, you can watch the first movie, but if you watch the second or third movie, you have to watch both of them together to get the full story, basically. Yeah. And that kind of goes into filming a little bit here, because the second and third films were actually filmed together, and the Wachowskis actually originally intended for the films to be released within a month of each other. So they wanted the release schedule to be May 2003 and then June 2003. But the studios forced them to push that 6 months between each other, and that's actually partially why the second part had such a negative reception, is because people stewed over the second movie before the third one came out for so long. And it didn't meet those expectations.
Interesting. Yeah. There was, like, nobody had really done that before, where they tried to release back to back
and that quickly
in 1 month. Yeah. That
even 6 months is unheard of.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been unreal to see it back to back, because you would have had some time to think.
You could have gone to the drive-in and seen it one then the other.
Yeah. Imagine that.
Yeah. So here's my final takeaway, and this might be a little controversial, and there's nothing to support this online, and I don't think anyone would ever officially say this, but I kind of wonder if the Wachowskis actually thought about making only one sequel originally, and potentially between the second and third movie, I think there might be a really great super film in this. If we were to cut most of the Zion side character pieces, maybe some of the other plot lines that don't necessarily go anywhere or add much, and that'd be something that personally I might be kind of interested in doing a fan edit of. I tried looking for one online, and there's a couple online. The most popular one is a fan edit which takes out all of the Zion parts of movie 1 and 2. And so basically it's mostly the second movie, and then the third movie is like, I don't know, 30 or 45 minutes basically long. Apparently even that has its issues, which I could very much believe. Like, there's certain things that I think you need to see, because you have to understand the stakes of what Neo's doing, right? Like with the machines and everything. And so I think certain aspects of the war or the battle are important, but probably don't need Neo to have his talk with Counselor Hammond and going and seeing like the underbelly of the Matrix. Like, for my own interest, like 20 times through, it's kind of neat to see like that, they thought about what was going on and how Zion ran and stuff like that. But we probably don't need that. We probably don't need like the rave and the sex scene.
If this was a book series previously and it was like 3 to 5 books, we would be looking at this and we would be saying, why didn't they go see that? And they would have cut that from the film. So the world building is kind of important, and I very much agree with you where like that could be cut. It also was important. You'd have to spend some time to really edit this down, I think. But I think some of the bloat was studio involvement. So So that's where I land on all three of them. Second one, still a great movie. I absolutely love it. The third one is starting to feel a little bloated for me and not holding up as well to all of the views I've watched in the past. I always used to enjoy, as a kid, the action scenes and everything, but I think as I've matured, I've come to realize why the third film kind of doesn't have the same reverence as the first or the second. Yeah. It's very understandable, as you like. Honestly, if you watch them all the way through and you're not someone who gets bored easily, amazing.
Yeah.
Like it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all above the bar of like entertaining.
Yeah.
It's just not as crazy as when you first saw the first one.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so overall, I think that's where I could leave it.
It's a lot.
I'm actually looking forward to getting back into shit that we haven't seen for a bit.
Yeah, same here. We've been on the Matrix train for a long time now.
Yeah. So I'm very excited for the next one, and we're gonna go watch that together, and we're gonna do one last episode on that.
Yeah, and it's gonna be smaller probably too. We're just gonna talk initial thoughts. We're gonna talk like what we liked,
what we didn't like, what we expect from maybe the ending, where that leads us. Yep. What happens?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us for. I don't even know how long this podcast will end up being once I've trimmed the hell out of it, but. As always, thanks for watching. It's been a great time. VCR with you, Jason.
Yeah, man. We've been wearing all this leather since we've been talking about this podcast or this movie.
Assless chaps.
Oh, I'm excited to take them off. They're getting a little
There's
sticky.
Not much to take off on these assless chaps, but anyway, have a good one, everyone. We'll see you after our viewing of The Matrix Resurrections. Yeah, coming out December 22nd.
Everybody go watch it. Listen to this, then watch the new movie, then come back for the recap.
And re-listen to this again and see what we were right about, what we were wrong about.
Yes.
All right, bye, everyone.